Right. Yeah, we can start. So, yeah, by now you might know today's topic about RBAC. So we'll see what are these, how it will be useful and how to create and use them. First, what is RBAC is? It is, let's say starting from full form, role-based access control. This is one of the components for securing access to our cluster resources. Like they allow us to manage and restrict what users or what services can do within the cluster. So with this concept, we create roles and we assign roles, with the limited permissions, whatever we want. But here, whom to assign? If you observe in the image, we'll be assigning that to service account. There is concept called service accounts, just like user accounts. We'll be having this concept in Kubernetes where we create these service accounts, we attach the role to the service account. Simply, let's say I'm an user, I'm a developer, let's say. So when I want to do something, I need to have access, right? Maybe access based on my role, maybe developer or tester, something like that. So that I can do only that. Similarly here also, same concept here. So there is a concept called service accounts where we create service account and we use them. And RBAC roles, these roles, there are something called roles where we create roles and we apply the roles to attach the roles to service accounts. So whatever the permissions the role has, will apply to service account. You may ask where we are using the service account in the pods. So in the manifest file, we can give a service account name. So it means the pod, whatever is there, will run as this service account with only. And whatever the permissions this service account have, based on the role whatever we gave, that permissions will come to pod. So these service accounts generally used by applications running inside the cluster actually to interact with the Kubernetes API. So each pod will have a default service account. By default, there will be a service account. We don't see that actually. Every namespace have a default service account. If you run, let's say test namespace we have, so there will be a service account for the namespace by default. So it will be used by default, even though we don't specify it. But we can create our own with our own permissions, and we can uh, use that custom service accounts in our configuration. So if you see here, pod you know this already, that is fine. Three concepts are there. So one is role I told. Okay, one is role. Role one, role two, something. Another thing is role binding is there. And service account. So as of now, we thought, okay, service, we discussed, right, service account just like a user account. For now, let's keep it like, it is like that only. It's like user account within Kubernetes only, not outside the Kubernetes. Now I need to give access to this guy. You know what I do? I'll create a role. Let's say role one. I'll create a role and how to attach this role to service account with the help of role binding. We are binding the role to the user service account. Binding means just attaching the role simply. That's all. So we are creating the role and we are attaching the role to the service account with role binding concept. So first is role binding is SCA, service accounts. You got it right? I'll create a role and I'll create a role binding which will attach to service accounts. In role there are two types. This normal role which where what this role will do is at a namespace level we can able to restrict them this role at the namespace level. So this can be for a particular namespace we can able to use it. So this is about normal role. There is something called cluster role, which will be creating at the cluster level. I mean, at the cluster level means cluster level permissions if you want, overall cluster level. So you can use this, you have to use this cluster role. But you want to, create a role just for limiting for one namespace, maybe, as an example, now I will say a service account is there. You want access to all the namespaces just for, reading the pods. So at that time, we'll be using cluster role because all the namespaces are involved. So you have to use cluster role. Role is if only particular namespace is involved. So like that. So got it? So we create a role and we create a role binding. We will be creating role binding also. Same thing here also. Role binding, sorry, 1 minute. And the cluster role binding. Role binding is for normal role. Cluster role binding is for cluster role. We'll be creating that, and in the role binding, we'll define which service account we need to use. And in the role, we define which permissions. So here, permissions we define. Next, define SCA, which to use, I mean, which to attach or which to bind. You can say bind it, no need to say attach. So like this. So with this concept, like we can restrict access if it is required. I mean, obviously, we may require. These service accounts can be useful, if we are in a cloud, we can integrate with cloud users also. That level of restrictions also we can do. I mean, as of now, we are not there, but we'll see that once the time comes. So this concept will be used by everyone because the roles restrictions, that's one of the security thing, right? So everyone will use that. Got it? So as an example, let's say where to use this service account, you may get it out, right? I mean, maybe you're still confusion. Let's say I have a pod, some Nginx pod, let's say. So I want that pod to access only one config map or to access only config maps, not other things. Correct? So at that time, what I do, I'll create a role. I'll create a role binding, and obviously, I'll create. Sorry, I'll use that role in the pod. Got it? So let's try this one. So what we do here is, let's try. Let's create a role. First, let's create a service account. Let's create a service account first, and let's create a role. Let's go back. Yes. Come on. Wolf notes are ready. Let's create a service account. It's simple. Yes, it's better to write here. So API version v1. Please mind this because I'm connected to mobile network. Obviously, it will be slow. So kind is service account. metadata, some name you can give. It's gone. Let me log in again. Thank you, Congress government, you know, for this amazing things you did. Okay, let's write it again. It's simple, so I guess we can do it. Yes. So API version. Ah, come on, man. Kind service account. Hope you can see my screen at least. Can you see?
Yes, bro.
No. Hey, let me just change my network. Let me just give me a minute. Let me change my network. We'll see. Hey, can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yes, bro. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Earlier I connected to Geo. Hopefully, Airtel should better. I'm just creating a service account. So yeah, I'm creating for API version V1 kind service account. Where you want to create? What is the name of the service account? Maybe test TSA. You want to create any namespace? You can give it namespace. You know that. If not, let me ignore it. Both that is fine. Now apply it. kubectl apply -FNFSA. Obviously created. How to see it? kubectl get SA service account. See default service account. It will come by default. I told you right. For every namespace, there will be a default one. Let's say -n test. See, so by default, this default service account will be used by the pods. I mean, whatever the pods running in that namespace. So we created our own account. You can describe it. kubectl describe SE slash test hyphen SE. There will be nothing. If you see, there will be nothing. Oh yes, it's an empty service account. Now what we have to do is, what we'll do now is create a role with some permissions and create a role binding attaching to the service account. So let's create a role. Maybe let's write here. Yeah, this is better. API version. An API version for a role is different. RBAC dot authorization.k8s.io/v1 and kind, of course, role, just role, metadata. These are obvious. Test role, something, whatever the name. This is fine. What we are doing now, so we are creating a role with some permissions, right? Of course, for the role name and everything is done. Now I have to give permissions. This is something called rules. Rules, API groups. Wait. Yeah. So API groups are like, it's like, whatever the resources we have within the Kubernetes API. So in this, we'll be defining API group as empty because it will try to using multiple resources, or let's say an overall resources I would say. When defining permissions only will give, because each resource belongs to an API group, correct? API group, if you see, what is this? This is an API group version, right? Belongs to that. V1, V2, so app slash V1. There are multiple things. You can give anything here. But let's keep it blank because we do support multiple API groups, right, in cluster. So let's leave it blank. We'll use, we'll keep it blank so that it will be applied for every API group. Next thing is resources. What resources you are giving permissions to? As an example, I told, right, config maps. Do I have config maps? Let me see. kubectl git cm. Oh yeah, there are config maps again. So what I am doing now is I'm creating a role to access only config map resource. And what are the permissions inside config maps? Verbs. So what are the permissions we'll give at verbs? So let's say get list. So these permissions will get. So we are creating a role with the get and list permissions for config maps. Got it? There are multiple verbs. Status, RBAC, verbs list. Let's see here. There are so many. See, create, delete collection, get list, patch, update, watch. There are multiple things. Based on what you require, we'll be giving that. So I just want to give get is mandatory because if you want to read it something, you need get permission. So get is mandatory and list I gave because I want to list the config maps by this role. The main idea of this role is just what is that? Creating a role with limited permissions where this role has access to config maps to list the config maps. Only that, not any other thing. Let's say if there is a service account already, right, for a test SA something. If we apply the role to that service account, it can only access config maps and just list them. That's it. Not more than that. It cannot create or it cannot delete it because we haven't given that permission. So like that. So hope it's clear. I mean, what I'm saying. Is it? We're just creating roles simply. Creating roles and attaching to accounts. Service account. That's it. How we'll do role binding. So we have a role, we have a service account. Now we need to attach these together, right? This role has to be applied to the service account. It means this role has to be attached to the service account. So which we call it binding, role binding. So write role binding. Let's copy this until here. We'll change it. Role sorry, role binding, test role bind, something. This is fine. Now we write subjects. In the subjects, we define who, whom to assign. You told role binding. Whom we need to bind the role? Service account, right? Kind service account. And of course, what is the name of that guy? Test SA. So this is to whom we are, assigning role binding. And what you are binding? I'm binding a role, right? So what is the role name? Guide role name. What is role name? I think test role. It is on top. API group. The API group is the role group. This we have to give. I mean, this role is which part of which API group? Obviously, this is the API version. That's it. First thing is we created a role with some permissions to config maps. We can give anything like this, comma, space, update, something, anything like this. No worries. Here also you can give anything like this. Let's say like this. No worries. So we're creating a role with some limited permissions, obviously, and we are creating a role binding because we need to bind that role, attach the role to service account. So we created a role binding with where you know we define the subject to whom we need to assign and what need to be assigned. Obviously, service. I mean, the role need to be assigned to the service account. That's what we did. Now we simply copy it, paste it. That's it. Let's apply. Let's see. QCTL apply -f RBAC. It's created. kubectl. How to see? Get role. Obviously, you can see the role. Describe it. Role slash test role. See what are the permissions you got for resources. What are the permissions? That's what we gave. Now let's kubectl get role. Sorry, role binding. See test role bind. Describe it. Kubectl describe role slash test. We link to service account, right? This is the role we linked, right? See, that's the information we got. See, that's how we created a role, service account, and role binding also done. Now, how to use it? Simple. Just go to our deployment file. So we have a here is this code. Yeah, here below. One minute, my mouse point. Yeah, in the container spec, define service account name. Just type in SA. That's it. Now, this service account will be used in order to run this Nginx application, whatever the container. Got it?
Yeah, bro. But how it will be user specific?
How it will use?
Yeah, how it will be user
Yeah,
specific? Now we define role, so user can only able to
config
list
maps.
update.
So now,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
or we are using secrets also, so you can able to read the secrets. If let's say you kept some other permissions, what are the other things? Any other issue, let's say HPA, or let's say what are the other things? I'm forgetting. Any other resource type, daemon set or something like that. It cannot access them. Let's say we remove the secret permission and we are using the secret here. It won't work. I mean, it can't access because it says no access. So currently we gave two permissions. We can remove one. Let's say we remove secret and we give only config map. Now what happens is this application, I mean spot, whatever we are accessing, cannot access the secret. Let's try that. Role, sorry, all right. Let's remove the secret here, the permissions for secrets. Sorry. Hopefully, yeah, this is correct. Yes, kubectl apply. Changed. Okay. Describe role. See, only config maps are there, correct? In the deployment, we are using service account, okay. We are using secrets, but no config maps. Obviously, we don't need it. Let's see it. kubectl apply -f deploy. Oh, it's already running. Let's delete it. Sorry. Let's describe something. See, what is the service account? I don't see. Yes, see, this guy will run these pods. Let's go inside. It's present. What is the service account? Yeah, sorry, these are different. Sorry, my bad. All right. So yeah, what I was saying is, you create a role. You create a service account. You want to give some access to service account. You create a role, and uh, you create a role binding. Sorry, I'm forgetting that. To bind this role, I mean whatever the permissions you created, to bind that role to service account. So the service account will get the access. So that's about the role. Where is it? That's about the role and role binding. We have some other concept, right, called cluster role. Look, this I told you that two roles are there, two types of roles are there. One is roles and one other is cluster role. The only difference is the scope, how they will be applied or how they will be used. Both are same thing, just giving some permissions to some resources. A role is this one. A role is limited to namespace only, one namespace. Let's say I'm creating the role. I think I created a role in default namespace. So this role will be applied only to this namespace, not to other namespaces. So the range of this role is within limits of namespaces. Cluster role obviously means at the cluster level. So cluster level meaning it can grant access across my entire cluster with multiple namespaces. I mean all the namespaces. Sorry. So that's the difference. But the working is same. I mean the concept behind these roles is same. Got it? So just give some permissions. Only I told you, right? The scope is different. That's it. What is the scope means? Role will be applied at the individual namespace level, whatever the namespace you created, and cluster role will be applied at the whole cluster level. So that's the only difference. The way you create is same. Simple. Let's use the same thing. Kind is cluster role now. Sorry. Kind is cluster role name. Test. Cluster iPhone role something. Metadata, these are all fine. API groups, fine. Resources, config maps, not these. Because these config maps and secrets are at a namespace level, right? So for each and every namespace, this will be different. But this is a cluster role. You have to give cluster level access if you want. Let's say persistent volumes like this. Get list. We can remove updates. Maybe not. I mean, just remove it. So when you're creating cluster role, the use case will be like, you want to give access at the cluster level to service account. So that's why these nodes and persistent volumes are at the cluster level, not a namespace level. If you ask for a PVC, persistent volume client, that's a namespace level again, right? But PV does not belong to any namespace. That's why we're using that. Obviously, nodes also does not belong to any namespace. That's how we create a cluster role. I mean, it's not mandatory to create a cluster role. If you want it, if you want a cluster role, you create it. Same way, if you want a role or for some namespace, you create a role. If you want a cluster role for something, you create a cluster role like this. Role binding is same. This won't change. Role binding is same. So now what we have to do, change the role name obviously. Sorry, here. And here cluster role. Come on. Yeah, in here cluster role. That's it. Now if I create it, cluster role will be created and the role will be binded to whom? Service account. Let me apply and show you. Oh, something is wrong. Invalid role ref, RBAC role ref is a group. Wait, James. Did I missed anything? Cluster role, okay. RBAC authorization KTS dot IO dot one. Sorry. Blah blah blah. These are all fine. Nothing maybe here from the role binding. Okay, all good. Okay, test role bind. Okay, subjects. Service account test test. So we have cluster role, class test, cluster role. The same thing. API group. Same thing. What the hell is wrong with this then? Subjects correct. Yeah. We did not change anything over there. That's cool. I think API group might be need change. Role ref invalid. Okay, maybe this API group has to be different. Let's figure it out. What's exactly the new one? Cluster role binding. Wait. Am I same thing? Cluster role binding. Let's see this. Sorry, my bad. I told you earlier cluster role binding, but I forgot it. This should be fine. Let's try this. Let's try. Just Y2. Let's try. Hopefully it should work. Required valid. Test role one is invalid. Oh, sorry, my bad. Namespace is mandatory because we are creating a cluster role, correct? And cluster means obviously we'll have multiple namespaces. Which namespace this service account belongs to? I have to give that. You have to tell that. There may be, you know, it's created. There may be, let's say we have five namespaces. In all those five namespaces, or in each and every namespace, there is a service account called test SC. Same name, but different namespaces. We can use that. How does cluster role binding know which namespace to use and which role to use? That's why namespace is mandatory. Sorry, my bad. Now it's created. kubectl describe SEA slash test SC. What? Why is not showing anything? How to check the parameter? I think describe should work. Maybe let's describe the roles. At least it will show that. Cluster role slash test hyphen cluster hyphen role. See the permissions. These permissions will be are applied to pods. So those service accounts will be used in the pods, and obviously whatever the permissions those pods, those service account get will have their permissions for the pods. I'm sorry today, I don't know why, but yeah, I'm confusing with the words. So yeah, that's about this concept RBAC and service accounts. Hope it's clear. I mean, what are those? What are roles? What are cluster roles? What are role binding? Cluster role binding? And what is service account and where to use it? How to create it? So hope it's clear. And of course, when you practice, you'll get to know more clear, obviously. So is it clear?
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, bro. But when we are talking about RBAC, it will be defined like the user role as well, right? Suppose, for example, user can be admin, worker, or something. So how it will differ actually the role which we are defining to the
So
namespace and
you meant to
cluster role
say how this rule apply to the user. So in
is
that case,
correct.
what we'll be doing, let's say your users are there in some Active Directory or some, let's say, in cloud somewhere. There will be somewhere, right? All the user list, correct? Now those, let's say, generally everyone use Active Directory or LDAP. These kind of things where every user information will be stored. They link that to service accounts. So now there is a user called test in LDAP or Active Directory. Let's say an organization, the user called test, and they'll create a service account test and link to your user ID. First, of course, they'll integrate the third party, whatever provider they are using. They'll integrate with Kubernetes and they'll use it. So like that. So they'll integrate that. This, as of now, we have seen service accounts limited to within the cluster. I mean, of course, we cannot access from outside the cluster service account by default, but you can use the accounts from outside, somewhere from third party, and you can able to integrate with the local service accounts, and you can able to use that. We'll see this, concept in when we come to cloud, but yeah, that's how generally we'll use integrating outside users to service accounts and use it like that. Sorry, like that.
Okay.
Okay. Um, any other doubts? Anything? Yeah, correct.
Not not.
Practice, and of course, sorry, let me know if any doubts. Okay, we'll discuss. And yeah, we'll meet tomorrow same time, 7 a.m. There are just two more topics pending, so we can close it. No problem. Okay, then bye. Bye
Okay,
all.
bro. Okay, bro.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.